Hey, welcome back. Last time I did a video where I kind of showed you some of my houseplants and some of my favorite things. This time I want to go in a little bit more detail. So this is my plant rehab and propagation, division, just some kind of basic houseplant skills. One of my favorite resources is this book right here. It's Root, Nurture, Grow. I will put a link to this in the comments, but this one's really good in terms of giving you some basic information on how to propagate and different things you can do. It's got some information on pests as well, beautiful pictures. It also has a really helpful propagation chart, and it lists a ton of different varieties and tells you the best way to propagate those. So this is a really good resource if you're ready to start making babies from your plants. So today I'll show you the rehab stuff first. This one is a spider plant. You can see he's looking really sad. We've also got this one. You can totally tell what this is, right? I got this from a nursery. They gave him to me. I'm going to attempt to rescue him. This is a Calathea medallion, and he was at a nursery. It's a nursery grocery store, so they put this pretty plant over at the grocery store, and they put it way too close to the draft, and he got really cold. So we're going to trim him back and see if we can't breathe some life back into it. My last rehab, if you guys watched my first video, you will remember my beautiful, not now, Calathea picturata, I believe it is. And he was looking so good, but what happened is he ended up with spider mites. And so when I was treating it, spider mites, there's a lot of different ways to treat it. I had read that Calathea leaves are very sensitive. Obviously that is the case. So I went ahead and I just repotted him after I treated him. You can see most of the leaves are pretty rough. When we go to look at this, I will show you a little bit closer what that looks like. So again, we'll see if we can rehab him a little bit and bring him back to life. And then for propagating, I'm going to try, I've never tried this before. This one is a pink lemon. I bought him because he fruits, but he also is absolutely beautiful. He's variegated. Truth be told, I think this was the spider mite vector. He's been treated quite a few times, and I am not seeing any signs. I've been checking, when you're treating for pests, you want to treat often and you want to keep checking. So he has been getting sprayed with a little bit of dish soap and water, and then hosed down with the hose as hard as he can take it. And then I coat him in neem oil and wait a couple days and repeat. So he's looking pretty good, but I'm going to try propagating a piece of this and see what happens. And then I've got a neon pothos here. I really like him. He's got a little bit of watering damage on this guy. It's ready to go. But there is quite a bit of crowding in here, so I feel like instead of binding, it's getting a little bit round, which is fine, but it does mean that I've got some room in there to pull maybe a small baby and get that started. So we'll do that too. And then the last one is my Stromanthe Trio Star, and this one, again, it's just in the nursery pot it came in. Also got hit with spider mites. Spider mites really love Calatheas. So that's been super fun. I can see there's still a tiny bit. They're much better. But if you look underneath here, you can see that there's quite a few different plants in there. So I'm going to pull probably 2 out of this and get them started in a separate container so they can start getting bigger. So those are our plants for this project. And then tools, I have a very soft cloth, and this is actually just water. This is not, there's no dish soap in this because we're going to treat the Calathea leaves again, and I don't want to burn them again. So we're just going to do a manual removal of those little bits of spider mites that I can still see. And then kitchen shears. And I've got a little nursery pot here that's ready for the Stromanthe. If he'll fit, we'll see how much I get out of there. And it's got a little bit of soil in there, so that's ready to go. All right, up first, let's start with my spider plant. It needs the least amount of work. So what happened with this spider plant is I put it in the cutest little basket in my bathroom, which I hoped would have enough indirect light, but it didn't. And so you can see where the leaves start losing their green, real faded down through here, real faded. It got pretty bad. It was kind of one of those I knew I needed to do it, but I pulled it out 2 days ago and I put it under a grow light. So it looks a lot better, honestly, than it did. And you can see it's pretty dusty there. So to get him looking a little bit better, spider plants are great because you can kind of just trim off anything that doesn't look good, which is fantastic. So I'm just gonna go in, I'm gonna take all these. You always wanna get rid of stuff like this because this is the perfect vessel for breeding pests and bugs and bacterial growth and rot and all the things that houseplants don't want. So we've got that cleaned up. You can see this still looks pretty bad, but up here looks okay. And also with these, I've got some brown tips at the end here. See if you can see that. So we are going to just give it a teeny tiny haircut. You're gonna hold it up here and just clip off that little bit. This one, you can see the yellowing goes to about here. So I'm gonna just clip right there. And this one. All right, so now I've got that all cleaned up. I'm going to leave him under the grow light. I joke and I call it the plant hospital. So he will stay in there for a couple more days as he starts greening up. These plants are incredibly resilient, so he'll pop back super fast. And then I will find him a happier location where he gets a little bit more sunshine. So there is that. And then this one, full disclaimer, this is the Calathea medallion again that I got from the store. They gave it to me as a rescue. I should have done this a week ago and I didn't because I wanted to save it to show on a video because it was such a good example. I probably should have done it a week ago, but I haven't had the time to get the video stuff out. So what we're gonna do is you take a quick look here. You can see this was new growth. It's pretty flimsy, right? So it just comes out. What I am going to do is I'm going to trim this pretty close to all the way back. There's still a little bit of firmness in there. You can kind of hear it as those scissors hit. I have been keeping him moist the whole time so that hopefully the root stays healthy. And again, guys, I am about 2 years into my deep love of indoor plants. I've always done a lot with outdoor plants, but indoor plants is newer, so I'm by no means a professional, but I am an optimist, so I am hopeful. And there's definitely one thing with plants is it's not over till it's over, and it's amazing what they'll come back from. So I've got him cleaned back, and you can see there's still like one more little piece of leaf. I could leave that, but I'm not going to because that's just one more spot for any rot or anything to set in. So I'll just clip it right at the soil line. And make sure that his dirt is not too compact in there. I haven't even checked what they had him planted in. So it feels nice and moist, and definitely the plant is firm down in here. So I am really hopeful that he's gonna pop back. So I will continue to keep him moist. I might actually take just like a sandwich bag or plastic bag and pop it over the top with a couple holes in it for a couple days, just to give him a little bit extra humidity and protection, and put him in my plant hospital under the grow light. Definitely want to put that back in because can't tell what it is now. All right. So next, probably the biggest rehab project I had for this video. My beautiful Calathea. I love this plant. I always have. It's done really well, but it was up on a high shelf. I pulled it down in my one video for you guys, and that's when I figured out it had spider mites and treated it, and the leaves are just way too gentle for what I did. So you can see on there, perfect lighting for you. There's a little bit of sticky residue on the leaf, which is a good indicator of spider mites. This never had any webbing on it. It kind of threw me. But what I did see were the teeny tiny little white specks along the vein of the leaf, and then that stickiness. So the first thing that we're gonna do is I am going to cut off all of these dead leaves here because they aren't doing the plant any good any longer. And this is gonna end up looking very much like the last calathea we did. You can see as I pull it out there, make sure you can see, that there's a lot of firmness right here. So I'm not gonna cut that, I'm gonna cut just above it. And then we'll take these guys. And this is really like a watch and wait kind of thing. You're gonna watch it and you might find that more dies off and you need to do more trimming, and you just wanna watch for signs that the plant is starting to come back. Seriously, so sad though. I absolutely love this plant. And this one, the leaf is great, which I'm hesitant to cut because there's so few good leaves, but you can see that it's pretty compromised in the stem. I do see a little bit of sign of new growth right through here. This is where it would be putting off a new leaf. So I am going to leave this. I will probably end up cutting it eventually, but in the hopes that it can help produce some chlorophyll and give it a little bit more strength, we're gonna leave that one. All right, and again, just making sure I pull out all the dead little pieces that I don't want in there. This was also the one in the last video, if you watched it. I talked about the possibility of root rot because I had it in a pot with no drainage. So I did repot it after that, and the roots do look decent. But I put a lot more perlite in there, which is this stuff. For those of you that are new to houseplants, everyone talks about perlite and I had no idea what they were talking about. It's this, it's very like light, breakable, stone-ish, very porous, but it keeps your soil light and it helps things to drain through so that it doesn't get too heavy and muddy. I'm pretty confident with this. If you can see, you know, some of this stuff still looks pretty darn savable. So hopefully this guy will bounce back. So for these 3 leaves here, again, this one is super questionable. If I had better leaves, I would cut it because you can see he's got a little bend there. He's not doing that great. He's also still clearly got some residue of spider mites, but he's got to have some leaves, hopefully, as many as I can save. So, plain water. I'm not gonna do soap this time because it really made him mad. And these leaves are pretty fragile. So I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna make sure that I'm wiping along the stem all the way to where the base is, where the leaf meets stem, in all these little crevices. Now, one mistake I did make the first time is spider mites are gross and I didn't want to use a reusable cloth. So I used a napkin. Terrible idea because then you can't tell what is napkin lint and what is spider lint. Or spider lint, spider mites, because they look really similar. And this is something I have to do, you know, every few days as I'm trying to eradicate these. They're nasty, nasty little creatures. And I had plants for a long time before I had any pest problems. And when you have 100 plus plants, pest problems become a very cumbersome chore. All right, so if you can see, I'll lift it up a little bit higher here. This looks way better. It's not sticky anymore. I don't see any more signs of white little mites. You can also see just the leaf and how much essential scarring it's getting because spider mites go in and they suck all the life out of your plant and scar it up. So I'll do the same thing on these leaves. These ones are even smaller and more delicate. And all his pretty color that was in that other video, if you guys saw it, man, he looks bad. Yeah, that luminescence of the leaf is just so pretty. Hoping I can save him. So one thing that this was definitely a learning experience for me is even when your plants are up high and they look like they're doing super great, it is still important to pull them down every so often and do a thorough inspection. Like from far away, he looked fantastic. There was no reason to think that anything was going on. Like I said, you couldn't see any webbing or anything. They were all on the underside of the leaves. He was putting out new leaves. He was putting out flowers. And then once I pulled him down, it was a whole different story. So let's see if I can get this in focus for you guys. There's another shot of all those little spider mites all along the leaf there. Now I am pretty anti-chemical. I do use neem, which I use when I have to, but I really prefer manual pest removal if at all possible. So I know there's a lot of people that would never bother to do this, and yes, it is a cumbersome process and you will have to do it again and again. But I have 2 little girls and 2 dogs and a cat, and I just don't really feel like treating all my plants with a bunch of insecticide. So they get a sponge bath instead. All right, so there it is. It's trimmed up. Like I said, I'm gonna give it a few days and then I'm probably gonna take anything else, but that should give me enough time to kind of see what's gonna die and what's gonna take off. Again, I will put him in the plant hospital under a grow light, and he's probably a little bit too big to put anything over for humidity, but I do have a humidifier. Another thing I learned with spider mites is they don't like humidity, they like dry plants. So if your plants are too wet, you get fungus gnats. If your plants are too dry, you get spider mites. Finding the balance. So I will put him in close proximity to my humidifier a few times to just like really get it nice and moist so all those leaves stay moist. And hopefully we get rid of the little monsters. Okay, so next up, we're gonna make a mess. And this also, like I said, I've been treating it quite a bit and it's doing pretty well. His leaves also got really mad with the soap solution. So that's part of the reason I'm gonna separate this out. As you can see, there's so many separate little plants in there that could be taken apart. And right now it's just so dense, it's really hard for me to get in there and thoroughly treat the leaves. So it's just a good excuse to pull them apart. So I believe, if I remember right, the rules of repotting and separating are that you always water first. As you can see, I'm doing this on my kitchen counter, so I don't do that because it's really messy. So you can totally choose to do that. I believe that's the preferred method. I'm not. So we just take a quick look in here and see we've got some really healthy roots. You can tell it's been in here a long time. Right here you can see that's going to be an easy one to pull off the side there. So I'm going to just very softly start to break that apart a little bit. I like to use my hands because you can feel how much force or resistance you're getting. Look how messy that is, and I haven't watered yet. Okay, so you can see I still have 3 plants here that I could divide further if I wanted to. I'm not going to because I don't want them to be too tiny and sparse. So I'm gonna shake a little bit of the dirt out of this, mostly because the pot I have is really small. One thing I learned is calathea don't really want a super huge pot. So it's a fine line between too small of a pot or too big of a pot. So I went small. So I'll make sure that I've got room. All right, so I've got all this here. And you can see these leaves, I've been kind of trimming them as I go. They were so damaged from the dish soap. Again, we'll be able to go through and we're just gonna trim these little edges. This leaf is so bad, I would totally cut it, but there's not much on that one. All right, so here's my little container. I'll put this guy back in his pot for a minute. I'm gonna dig a nice little well for him in the middle. Push all that soil to the side. So at some point I will bring you guys, I have a salon, it's an eco-friendly, holistic salon, and we have a ton of plants there. It gets great southern exposure. I work there with my aunt. She's also fantastic with plants. So we have a lot of different things there. So my intention with this little baby trio star is to bring him down to work because we don't have one of these yet. All right, so now I'm just going through and kind of putting some dirt around the edges, making sure he's kind of situated in there. One thing I've learned is if you do not set him deep enough in the pot, when you water, it's gonna run all over and make a big mess. So try to make sure you've got him in deep enough. And then because I don't water before I do this, you do need to water them immediately. I'm not going to do it while we're taking the video because you know what it looks like to water, but I will take him over to the sink and I will saturate the soil thoroughly and make sure that he's got water all the way through. All right, and you can see he's already putting off new growth right here. He's pretty happy other than his little damage. So I'll just take some of these pieces off here, clean it up a little bit, mostly because it'll look nicer. And then like I said, any of these little crispy brown leaves right here, I can just trim the edge and trim the edge. One of the things that actually alerted me to the spider mites was the crinkly leaves. So see how this one is much more crinkly than most of them? That tells me to double check underneath it. And I don't see any new signs of spider mites. That might just be previous damage, but something to keep in mind. If you have a leaf that's looking all crinkly and it's not supposed to, check underneath because they are tiny and hard to see. All right, so that guy is ready. And again, just because I repotted him, I'm gonna keep an extra eye on him, make sure he gets lots of water, probably a little extra light. My Stromanthia and Calathea both do better with a little less light. So if he goes under the grow light, he'll kind of be off to the side. All right, and then for the remaining plant, I'll show you guys here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and arguably this is probably 5 if I wanted to pull it. I'm not going to, but I am gonna break these in half to give more room in the pot so they're not growing on top of each other. So I'll do that just, again, nice and gently. I believe the term I saw in a plant video was teasing the roots apart. Try not to rip them more than they have to. And really, I'm fine with this because that's going to encourage the grow separate. So they're kind of growing away from each other and making more room in the pot. And that way, when I have to sit there and wipe them all down, I can see where I've wiped and where I haven't. All right, so obviously this pot is going to need a little more dirt to make up for what we took out. And I will do that later. But lots more room, lots more airflow. It's kind of a fine line, you know, big bushy plants are awesome, but they are harder to check for growth and they are harder to check for disease and they kind of struggle to get some light. So sometimes it's nice to put some more room in there. All right, that was our big mess maker for the video. Next, we are going to do the citrus. So I have never tried to propagate a citrus. My little book I showed you guys tells me I can do it with the stem cutting, so I'm gonna try it. Again, he's got lots of growth on there. So I'm gonna take my kitchen shears. There are people that are fastidious, and it's probably more important depending on what you're dealing with. But it's recommended that you clean your shears every time. I obviously am not in this video, but there's your disclaimer. You're supposed to clean your shears. I'll just check for any signs of trouble. Here's another little growth node right here. It's an interesting plant because it's got these big spikes on them too, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to take this guy. It's going to be slightly out of camera for you guys, but this is just a little thing of filtered water. We have a Berkey, so I always use Berkey water for my plants. It takes out any chlorine or anything. And I was hoping to keep those leaves. I'm going to trim them. So you don't want any leaves that are going to be submerged in the water because they can increase your chance of rot. So I'm just going to snip that one, that one. Again, I haven't done this before, so I don't know if that goes for these little spines. Maybe they'll rot, maybe they won't. We'll find out. All right, so I'm gonna do it just like that. He's gonna sit in his water. I will change this out about once a week and keep an eye on it and see if we can't get some roots on there. All right, Neon Pothos. I've wanted it for a while, this leaf. Pretty sure this is overwatering. But he's really packed in there, like super tight. You can see there's tons of new little leaves emerging in here, tiny ones, new. So while he's so condensed and hasn't started vining, I'm gonna go ahead and pull a piece off so that I can have more than one. So pothos are known for being super easy to propagate. Usually do a water propagation. And the big thing you want to look for is you want a growth node, like right here. And they're usually right where the leaves come together. Here's another one right here. And just stick it in water, same as the previous one. We're gonna watch it. We're gonna make sure that the water gets changed out every couple days and wait for our roots to form. And actually, as I look at this, you can see someone took a cutting here before I ever got it. This, because it's slightly yellow, I don't love the look of that, so I'm actually gonna trim that just because I don't want any extra trouble. So down to where it's firm. And then we've got our little growth nodes here, and that should be ready to go. And again, full disclaimer, I've done this a few times. Most of the time I have good luck. It doesn't always work because I'm still new at it, and really, you know, it's nature and not everything works every time. It's kind of, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So there's that, and it's ready to go back. I trimmed off that little leaf just for aesthetic purposes. This one honestly could use trim too. He came like that from the nursery, but all right. So that is our rehab and propagation video. Let me know if you guys have questions or what your favorite thing to propagate is, how you've battled spider mites on your calatheas. I'm always interested in that because they're nasty. All right, thanks guys.